A local group of Korean Americans has a very nice way of expressing their gratitude to American veterans who served in the Korean War. Stay tuned to hear more. My guests are Donald Barker and Kenneth Goodman, who served in the Korean War. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
A local group of Korean Americans has a special way of thanking Korean vets, American vets who served in the Korean War, and we're going to hear more about your experiences with that group a little bit later. But for right now, we're going to learn a little bit more about what happened with you fellows when you were in Korea. Some stories you will be telling us, and I'm going to start with Donald. Donald, you were a student when the Korean War broke out, and you enlisted. And tell us about your time, what you did to serve there.
I enlisted in the Navy in September of 1950. The reason I did that was, of course, the Korean War began on June 25th, 1950, in the pre-dawn hours. That's when the North Koreans attacked. The reason I did that was I was in the National Guard when I was 16 in my hometown, and it was an infantry unit, and I didn't want to be in an infantry unit. They were calling up some National Guard units. So I enlisted in the Navy. The Navy made me a corpsman. I went to Hospital Corps School, and then they sent me up to Mare Island Naval Hospital, and the next thing I know, they had me down at Camp Pendleton at Del Mar Field Medical Service School. And then following that, they shipped me over to Korea, and I found myself a platoon corpsman with the Marine Rifle Company over in the Punch Bowl campaign.
Now, tell us what your job as a hospital corpsman was. You accompanied a platoon. There were two of you, I believe, who accompanied a platoon.
Yes,
tell us about
Marilyn.
that.
That was with each rifle platoon in the Marine Corps. They have two Navy corpsmen. So I was their doc. They were my Marines, and so I was with the rifle company for the platoon for the first 6 months in Korea.
Did you go out with them on all their missions and so forth? You were right there with them. And you carried weapons, I suppose, as well as your medical kit.
Yeah.
Now, what happened when someone was wounded in one of their skirmishes? You'd treat them there on the spot. And
on the spot. That was the first treatment. The thing was, stop any bleeding had to be stopped. Tourniquets, whatever was necessary there, depended on the conditions. Some of the wounds were relatively non-life-threatening. Others were somewhat quite life-threatening.
So you would take them in, and you actually had field tent hospitals set up.
Yeah, well, there was a whole line of evacuation.
Okay.
We treated those right there on the spot. We had serum albumin for fluid replacement. And the next area that they went to was the battalion aid station. We had helicopters in Korea at that time. And so the time of getting them back was relatively short in many instances. But the question was getting them to the helicopter to begin with, and that was a process. Once the wounded were back at one of the field hospitals, then they had all the facilities there that were necessary.
And those were actually tents, right?
Yeah, these were tent hospitals. After my first 6 months with the line company, I was back at a battalion aid station briefly, and then back to a field hospital, Easy Med. So that's where I spent the rest of my time in Korea, was with Easy Med.
So when they came back to the hospital, your field hospitals there, if they needed more treatment, further treatment, where then they transported elsewhere?
Well, we had a hospital over there on the western front, north of Seoul. We were at Munsan-ni. That was on the Highway 1 on the way up to Panmunjom. And so at Incheon, which was right there at Seoul, on the waterport there, they had the hospital ship, the Consolation was there. And so they had all the facilities there for surgery and so on, too. Yeah.
And how did you get them onto the ship?
That was interesting. They had what we called a rail bus. Munsan-ni had the rail line came up from Seoul and Incheon to Munsan-ni, and they had this bus which was modified to run on the rail tracks. So from Incheon, they ran it up on the railroad tracks, and then hospital was right across the road from the railhead. And they took the bus off the railroad tracks and drove it over, and we put the stretchers inside. And then they were back to the railhead just across the road and down to Incheon and the hospital ship. That's the way that worked.
So you were involved more with the hill battles in the western part of Korea, and you wanted specifically, and I know you went through some very cold winters.
Yeah.
I hear that Korean winters are pretty bitter. But you wanted to talk about the Bunker Hill battle in August of 1951 was particularly difficult for you and everyone else.
Yeah, that was a significant battle there. That was in August of 51, 52 it was. Yeah, it was 52. August 15th, that's when we got the first casualties from that. Those hill battles were out in front of the main line of resistance never moved, but they had all the outposts out in front of the MLR. And so the Chinese wanted that in the worst way. It was a high ground, and they wanted it in the worst way. So they were really after that area. There was some major battle going on there. There were several outposts up in that area. And the first casualties we received were on a Friday evening on the 15th of August. And about an hour after sunset, that's when the first chopper came. It was a little bell with two stretchers. So that was the beginning. And that was on a Friday. So we'd been up all day Friday. And from that point on, we didn't get any respite from this until Monday afternoon. So we'd been up, by the time everything ended, we'd been up 72 hours. And we triaged 1,004 wounded Marines during that particular time. I worked in what we called minor debridement. We had all the extremities and anything you could do under local anesthesia. We ran out of sterile gloves. We threw the gloves in Zephyrin chloride solution, reused them. We operated, by the time everything was over with, we had operated on 397 wounded Marines. In the major tent, I think they had 142. Of course, those surgeries went on much longer, many of them, than what we were doing. So that was a major battle and memorable.
I did notice, read here too, that they did like more than 2 surgeries in an hour. That's how fast they were working and how much they had going on there.
In the minor
in the major one, I think.
Oh, in the majors?
Well, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
It says that 142 major operations under general anesthesia, amputations, and so forth, better than 2 an hour. So that just shows how fast everybody was working.
Some of those, they were working pretty fast. Yeah.
Now, were you involved in treating any of the Koreans, or they had their own hospital for their soldiers, didn't they?
The
South
Korean
Koreans?
Marine Corps, yeah. The Korean Marine Corps had a hospital just adjacent to where we were. So we had some interaction with the Korean physicians and their military up there. In fact, I went up there. They wanted to. Some of the doctors wanted to practice their English conversation, so I got well acquainted with them. I'd go up there in the off time and we'd chat, and So that was a good experience there.
And then what about the civilian population?
There were not supposed to be any civilians in that area, but unfortunately there were. And we treated a little girl, I remember she had had some injuries. And that's the only one I can remember that we treated there, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you have many more stories to tell, but I was going to ask you, Kenneth, you enlisted into the Air Force, and you were trained to be a combat engineer, but you have really bad PTSD, and you told me that you would prefer not to talk about that, but you did want to tell about a story that happened to you when you first arrived in Korea at Busan. And please tell us that story.
When we got to Korea, we were put on a little convoy headed north, and all of these people were coming south, women and children, and occasionally an old man. Well, we stopped to eat a meal, sea rations. And there wasn't a man on that convoy that didn't give his sea rations away. Well, my brother and sister, brother's 10 and sister's 12 years younger than I am, and I'm 18. I could see my little brother and sister as one of these children. And it made me feel very, very bad. And when we got back to go, I started to get up in the truck, and there was a little boy up there. And he says, "I go with you." And of course, he couldn't. And I was almost in tears to make him get down out of that truck. Well, all this happening, I wrote letters to my mother and my girlfriend telling them about this. Well, a few months later, the rest area, a Jeep pulled in, 2 men and 2 great big boxes in the back. And one of them hollered, "Sergeant Goodman, get in." I can't do that. "Yes, you can. Dr. Seal, get in." The captain says, "I'm a chaplain. And do you know Ruth French?" And I said, "Yes, sir. She's my girlfriend." Shortly after, we come some rice paddies, and there was a couple of little huts out in there with a bunch of children playing around. And we pulled down into the area where they were playing, and the boxes are sitting on top of me. Well, I got out, and he says, "Open them up," and I had no idea what was in them. And all the children came running, and there was clothes and food, and the children were just so happy and singing. My heart just about broke, and I just about cried. I guess I'm sentimental in that way. And that girlfriend of mine, she was my high school sweetheart. Well, you met her. She is now my wife. And she is continually devoted to children.
Now, she collected from her church, didn't she? She went around and collected the
Yes.
food and so forth.
She,
And you had said that you had been writing every letter you wrote home. You wrote home about the hungry children and their conditions of no clothes. And you inspired her, and she inspired her church people to help out. And then there's an interesting thing that I heard, that you're in California now, and you recently were in a courthouse somewhere, and you met a Korean person. Tell that.
in San Luis Obispo, in the courthouse, there's a cafeteria, and there was an elderly Korean man, and I was wearing his hat. So when I went to check out, he started asking me questions and so forth. And I said, "Yeah, I was in Korea, and all this." And about that time, my girlfriend, who was my wife, came up, and she was saying that I had provided clothing and so forth for the refugee children. Well, this man said that he was an orphan, and that he was there, and he started crying. And that was just yesterday.
Yesterday. And he was one of those children that you gave the food and clothes to. What, too bad he couldn't have been here today, too. Well, thank you so much, Kenneth. I'm thankful for hearing the story, and I'm thankful that you did that. So thank you very much. Now, the Korean American Senior Citizens League of Santa Clara County, for about, maybe 20 years, has been giving dinners to American vets who served in the Korean War. About 20 years they've been doing this, and they have an event where they give medals and certificates and plaques. We have one here. And it's a thank you for what you all did. Now, you received those recently, and Donald, you brought your plaque today, but you, Kenneth, you had a fire in your home recently. Everything that you received was burned, but they are preparing replacements for you, just so you know that. They didn't have it ready for today. I was going to bring it, but they're still getting signatures from dignitaries and so forth. So you will be getting everything that
Wow.
they gave you.
I didn't know that. Oh,
Well,
thank you
Well.
so much.
now, I have a little video for us to look at. Yeon Suk Park, she's an active member of that group and former president. And she wanted to be here today. She couldn't, so she did come to my home, and we did a little taping of her talking about her organization and about how they feel about the veterans. So let's take a look at that video now.
Okay.
As long as we are Korean, wherever they live, forever, we're going to honor the Korean War veterans. After they came to United States, and they realized that that's what they should have to show their appreciation. And so it was started in 1988, so it's going to be about 29th year. This event is a appreciation from our part. We always remember the veterans. So it's really excited, and it's covered with like a thanking and appreciation. That's the event. And then some veterans, they even cry, they burst in tears. And then some of them, it's reminding them it's a horrible that time. So their faces, some of them cry for joy, some of them cry for bad memories. But the event is always very successful with all the thanking and appreciation. Through this event, we hope to remind and educate our younger generations who are not familiar with the Korean War history and sacrifices paid by American soldiers. Any Korean War veterans who fought during the Korean War between June 25th, 1950 to July 27, 1953 are invited to this event. So for the details, please call our office 408-247-0605 and call me at 408-504-5687. Thank you.
how did you feel about what she had to say about your vet?
Well, it just makes me feel proud and happy that I was able to help someone.
And Donald, I want to hear how you feel about what they're doing for you. It's a little dinner and it's a certificate,
That's right.
but it means a lot, doesn't it?
Well, it's very honoring to have the Korean community here, and it's a senior community that has done this year after year now, and it's something we always look forward to. And they put on a program with entertainment, great food, and it's a reunion type event. So it's an emotional time. And it brings back memories of our days in Korea. But I know the Korean community here in the United States never has forgotten and never will forget what the Americans and the United Nations, but mainly the United States, did for South Korea, because there would not be a South Korea if it had not been for the Korean War and our participation in that.
I did hope that I could ask you about your volunteer time that you're doing for the injured Marines that are returning from Afghanistan and Iraq. It's the Semper Fi Fund that you're involved with.
That's right. Yeah, the Semper Fi Fund was set up back in 2004 to provide financial assistance to our injured and their family members so they could be at the bedside during the rehabilitation, because a major financial constraint for many families to be away from their home and work and so on during that time, and important for them to be there at certain times. So the fund has been a major blessing. Only 6% overhead, which is amazing for an organization like that, because it's all volunteer. That's the way they can do it that way, and so it's my participation in that is at the hospital at Palo Alto VA and Menlo Park, where they have the PTSD program, and so I'm the interface between the fund and the injured and their families.
Thank you both so much for coming and telling your stories and for serving our country and the people of Korea and serving our veterans of today here at home. We appreciate it very much. And I'm honored to have you both here.
I was nervous and reluctant to come, but now I'm glad I did.
We're very happy you joined us for this program. We love having you, and we hope to see you next time. Bye for now.